Hello and welcome to another episode of the Finrestra podcast. I am Jan Muscholt. In today's episode, I want to talk about the current high inflation in the euro area, the failure of the European Central Bank, and what the ECB can actually do against the current high inflation. So, if you, for example, listened to our very first episode with Uri from Positive Money Europe, when we talked about the ECB strategy review, you will probably know that the primary objective of the European Central Bank is price stability. And in practice, the ECB defines price stability as a rise in consumer prices of about 2% per year. Now, inflation was actually 5% at the end of 2021. So that's mainly due to energy prices. If you follow our YouTube channel, you will have seen a video about the current high inflation, where you will see that based on data of Eurostat, it's mainly driven by high prices for gas and electricity. Now, I just want to stress, I'm laughing, but it's actually not funny at all. If you look at the projections of the ECB staff of March 2021, so in March of last year, they were predicting that inflation would peak at the end of the year at 2%. So in reality, we got inflation of 5%. I mean, can you imagine? This is an organization. Its primary objective set by European treaties is to get price stability. Its own so-called experts say that inflation is going to be 2% at the end of the year. And in reality, inflation is more than double. It's actually 5%, which no sane person will accept as price stability, when the own definition of price stability is 2%. This is actually a massive and total institutional failure. I mean, this is crazy how much this institution is failing the people in the euro area. And it's also stunning to me that there's not much more political backlash against this colossal failure of the European Central Bank. So, imagine, these people, they have PhD economists who are responsible for forecasting inflation, because this is actually what they need to adjust their monetary policy to. They need to make sure that inflation is stable. And then their own experts, they're projecting that, by the end of the year, it's going to 2%, and it's actually 5%. What are they doing there? Are they sleeping? Are they just picking random numbers from a hat? This is crazy to me. And then, people will say, but the pandemic and uncertainty. I mean, we are talking about March 2021, not March 2020. If you would have made some bad forecasts at the very beginning of the pandemic, fine. I mean, I think my predictions of government debt and the impact on GDP were pretty okay, although I was working a full-time job, and then I made these predictions in my spare time, but I think I was pretty bang on. But these are people whose full-time job it is to forecast inflation, and then 1 year into the pandemic, remember in March 2021, the vaccines were being rolled out. We knew the fiscal response of governments. All of these factors were known. And now they are totally surprised by the fact that, we have this massive spike in energy prices. To me, this is totally unacceptable. I mean, sure, nothing's going to happen because reasons and politics and whatever, but this should call for a total reset at the very top of the ECB. People should be fired for this. There should be a barrage of critical questions, and both in the press and the European Parliament, for the top of the ECB. What are you people doing there? This is totally unacceptable. Now, I'm not going to rant the entire episode, and I want to make some proposals as well. But let me just stress one more time. You have this institution. You have the so-called successor of the Bundesbank in Frankfurt, like the ECB, has been put in Frankfurt to benefit from its aura of stable prices with high growth. And instead, we have gotten ever since the financial crisis very low growth, and now they're totally messing up inflation as well. So okay, rant over now. So what can they actually do? You know that like Frank Alderson and Isabel Schnabel and all these top people at the ECB, they're always talking about the impact of climate change and how climate change is part of their mandate because of market failures and because climate change is going to have an effect on inflation. Well, guess what? Now inflation is very high, and what does Schnabel say like in an interview? Oh, well, energy prices are out of control of the European Central Bank. Weird. This is very weird. If you're going to claim that climate change is part of your mandate because price stability reasons, and then you have something not long term, not medium term, but right now that's having a huge impact on inflation, you're going to say, oh, sorry people, we're not responsible for international energy prices. This is this is crazy. So anyhow, how could the ECB actually do something about inflation? Well, I guess now it's too late, but at least what they could have done instead of doing their TLTROs, which is aimed at real economic activity, what they could have done was make sure that the European economy is less reliant on fossil fuels and especially on imported energy. So what they could have done, and that was also one of the proposals that we talked about with Uri in our very first episode. If they would have, instead of buying government bonds and doing these TLTROs, if they would have given preferential loans with very low interest rates of maybe -3 or -5% for building renovation, or for investments in renewable energy, which doesn't rely on gas from Russia or from the Middle East or from wherever gas is imported, then the effect of these international energy prices on the European economy would be much less severe, and that would also have dampened inflation that we're currently experiencing. So the obvious first proposal would be that they finally take the proposals that NGOs have been doing for them, whether you call it green TLTROs or funding for lending for building renovation. This seems to be a obvious lever that the ECB can use. It's quite traditional policy where they make loans to banks, and then the banks pass on these cheap interest rates to borrowers in the real world, who make sure that their buildings or their homes are well insulated and they don't waste as much energy, or they have these heat pumps or solar panels or wind turbines or whatever, which can generate domestic energy which doesn't rely on this imported energy. The other thing that is to be done is, of course, to get people or to use models of inflation that actually work. And there I would want to refer to something that I read recently about a problem in molecular biology, where apparently some artificial intelligence of Google was able to solve the protein folding problem. Now I don't know all about the details, but apparently the artificial intelligence was very well able to predict how these proteins are formed. Now, I just mentioned this as an example because maybe the ECB should like have a prize, like the Swedish central bank has their famous fake Nobel prizes of economics, but maybe the ECB should have a useful price where they put like, they say like, yeah, if you're like a university group or maybe even a private firm or some programmers or whoever, just if some group is able to predict inflation and to share their model with us, and which shows like what has an impact on inflation and it matches the real world data, maybe wouldn't that be worth like not just 1 million euro, but maybe 100 million euro or even a billion euro? If your primary objective is price stability and you fail to forecast inflation, like, shouldn't you be first able to actually make sure that you know how inflation works and to have a model that can predict what you are doing, what effect it's going to have? And then finally, I want to say something about the purchase programs. So if the ECB and also some activists are calling on the corporate bond purchases, like, you know, that instead of, or in addition to government bonds, the ECB also buys corporate bonds. And then some activists and academics are saying like, yeah, but maybe if you want to have less of an impact on climate change, you shouldn't be buying these bonds of polluting companies like oil and gas companies. Well, now we can argue that maybe we still need this oil and gas because with these sudden supply shocks, this is going to have a massive impact on inflation. But I want to take it one step further. Like, it's their core business of oil and gas to produce oil and gas. But if we see that governments have not, in fact, been able or have not been willing or, in fact, have not done enough to make their economies less reliant on imported fossil fuels, maybe shouldn't we be looking also at the main purchase programs of the ECB? Like, is it normal that the ECB has all these trillions of government bonds? Maybe shouldn't they make also the government bond purchase program? Like, I think it's called the PSPP, the public sector purchase program. Shouldn't they also be doing some conditions on that? Like, if you say like, yes, for example, Belgium, because I'm based in Belgium, wouldn't the ECB be able to say like, if you are going to shut down your nuclear power plants and replace them by gas-powered plants as a transition to more wind turbines and more solar panels, but this is going to have an effect on your import of fossil fuels, then if you're going to produce more CO2 and burn more imported energy, then maybe you shouldn't be supported by this PSPP, and then we'll buy less of your bonds, and then maybe you can pay higher interest rates on your debt instead unless you do like more inflation-friendly policies. And with inflation-friendly, I mean policies that don't increase inflation. So this is something that the ECB should think about. Well, I'm sure they are not, because if you look at all of the proposals that activists have been doing, like their proposals about green teltros or their proposals about helicopter money, at best they say like, oh, this is an interesting proposal, but then in fact it turns out they don't even realistically take it into account. But now we see that had the ECB in fact listened to the activists and made sure that the funding costs of renewable energy and of building renovation would have been lower, then now inflation would have been lower. So maybe this is finally the time where they can look at what they are actually doing and hopefully deliver for both the citizens of the euro area and also for like people who are activists or who want to control the European Central Bank. Because I mean, I just want to say it one more time. The primary objective of the European system of central banks is price stability. You can look it up. It's in Article 127 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. If they think their mandate is a total joke and they fail on their primary objective of price stability, and you have these careerists talking about climate change and everything is in their mandate, except for the very real inflation that we're seeing right now, I mean, then I guess we can just shut it down. I mean, if they're going to say, oh yeah, but actually this inflation, we cannot control it, maybe we should get rid of the ECB altogether. I mean, there are, I guess there are some options where you have like a central bank that is only responsible for financial stability. Like you can do emergency lending and then you keep your basic interest rate, your short-term interest rate maybe at whatever percent, maybe at 2%, maybe at 0%, I don't care. But if you don't know how you can influence inflation and you fail to do your job, I'm not sure what the ECB is for at this moment. This is really, I think they're lucky that I'm not a member of the European Parliament, because this wouldn't pass, I think. So just to repeat the proposals I did. So first of all, they should get like these realistic models and just make a ECB price for it, like say like the first group that is able to produce realistic forecasts of inflation and then who can do scenario analysis, they're going to win like 100 million or 1 billion euro. It would be money well spent, I think, compared to the know-nothing economic PhDs that they have now who totally fail to foresee this 5% inflation. And then secondly, they should like do these teltros aimed at energy efficiency or maybe the creation of renewable energy. And they don't have to wait for it until another strategy review. They could do it like very fast. And then finally, they should look at the PSPP, the Public Sector Purchase Program, and maybe also put some conditions on the bond buying that they do of sovereign debt, and say that, dear government leaders, if you fail to make your economy less reliant on imported energy, because we saw in 2021 and also in the past, like in the run-up to the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008, those were the two periods when euro area inflation was far above the target, and both were driven by international energy prices. So I think it's very obvious that Europe, as an energy poor continent, so we hardly have any natural gas or oil in our soil, we should rely much less on imported fuels, not only for climate change, but especially for price stability. So my apologies for this quite angry episode. But I think that that current inflation is really showing that the ECB leadership has no clue whatsoever what they are doing. I mean, I'm sure they are doing very well for their own careers, but they are totally failing the 340 million people in the euro area. And I hope they will do better in 2022. And in some next episodes, I hope to be able to talk to some academics and also activists, not only on the European Central Bank, but including on the ECB, to listen to their proposals of a more effective and also efficient monetary policy. And before I go, I should say that you can find me on Twitter at Jan Muschot, that's at JANMUSSCHOOT. You can also mail me at jan.muschot@finrestra.com. And then finally, if you haven't seen it already, I am having a kind of giveaway on my LinkedIn. So because I'm still looking for new clients in 2022, I made a video about the two courses that I give. One is about banking for beginners and the other one is about green finance. And if you share that LinkedIn post, I will put the link in the description of this episode. So if you share that LinkedIn post with your contacts and then you tag somebody who would like my courses in the comments, I'm giving away 250 euros and I will announce the winner on Wednesday the 26th of January. So that's it. This has been another episode of the Finrestra podcast. Thanks for listening and till next time.